In the closing months of 1943, deep within a captured testing ground in occupied France, a group of German engineers stood in silence. Before them, a machine they had only ever seen through the haze of smoke and destruction, the American M4 Sherman tank. They had fought it, bombed it, burned it, and captured it. Yet now, for the first time, they would study it. Piece by piece, bolt by bolt. The German High Command had ordered a full evaluation. They wanted to know why this crude, mass-produced Allied tank refused to die. The engineers approached it with confidence. After all, they came from the land of the tiger, the panther, and the elephant, machines of unrivaled power and precision. To them, the Sherman was little more than an industrial toy, a poorly armored, undergunned box on tracks. But as they began to strip it down, that arrogance started to fade. The first surprise came from the tracks themselves. Simple, sturdy, and easy to replace. German tanks, by comparison, required complex components that needed days, sometimes weeks, to repair. The Sherman's crew could fix theirs in hours. Then came the engine. A robust, air-cooled design that ran smoothly even after being battered by dust, mud, and shrapnel. German engineers expected delicate craftsmanship. Instead, they found raw practicality. Every part was built for one thing: to keep moving forward. They tested the transmission, expecting fragility. It was anything but. The Sherman's gearbox could shift under strain without tearing itself apart. Its powertrain, though less sophisticated, was astonishingly reliable under field conditions. Then came the real shock. The engineers ran mobility trials, pushing the tank across uneven terrain, through mud, across debris. It didn't jam. It didn't overheat. It didn't fail. The Sherman, mocked as a Tommy cooker, just kept going. They began to realize that the tank's genius wasn't in its power. It was in its simplicity. The Tiger and Panther tanks, masterpieces of engineering, were also prisoners of their own complexity. Each required immense maintenance, specialized parts, and constant attention. If a Tiger broke down, it could take a week to repair, assuming you even had the tools. A Sherman could be back in action within a day. For the first time, the German engineers saw the true scale of the Allied war machine. Not in its strength, but in its efficiency. Every Sherman rolled out of American factories like clockwork. Thousands a month. Each one identical, interchangeable, and ready for battle. And that's when the realization set in. It wasn't that the Allies built a better tank. They built a smarter system, one designed for the long war. One engineer reportedly wrote in his notes, "The enemy has perfected the art of reliability. Where we build for brilliance, they build for endurance." As they examined the armor, they found something even more humbling. The steel was thinner, yes, but welded with precision that made it incredibly resilient under repeated impact. The Sherman's armor distribution was deliberate, thick where it mattered, light where it didn't. Weight was sacrificed for mobility, and it paid off. The Germans ran live-fire tests, firing captured 50mm and 75mm rounds. The Sherman took damage, severe in some cases, but it remained operational far longer than expected. Even crippled, it could retreat, fight, and be repaired. The engineers noted the interior layout. Every instrument was positioned for speed and function. Crew members could escape within seconds, unlike the cramped death traps of many Axis designs. A burned Sherman often meant survivors. A burned Panther rarely did. The German analysts, usually ruthless in their assessments, began to describe the Sherman with an unusual tone: respect. They realized this tank wasn't meant to be the strongest on the battlefield. It was meant to outlast the battlefield itself. And that was the Allies' secret. While Germany produced a few thousand elite tanks, America flooded the front with over 50,000 Shermans. Each one dependable, replaceable, and supported by a vast supply chain. The more the engineers studied, the more they saw it, the quiet genius of American production. Factories retooled overnight. Workers, many of them women, assembled tanks with ruthless efficiency. Where Germany had craftsmen, America had an army of engineers and laborers, building not just tanks, but an entire machine of war. The captured Sherman became more than a test subject. It became a symbol of everything Germany underestimated: the power of standardization, the strength of mass production, and the value of simplicity in the chaos of war. By the end of the tests, one officer wrote a final report for the High Command. His words were brief: "The Sherman is not superior in power. It is superior in persistence. It represents a war philosophy we cannot match." When Allied forces landed in Normandy months later, thousands of those very tanks rolled off the beaches. They weren't perfect, they burned, they broke, they fell. But for every Sherman destroyed, another took its place. And another. And another. The German engineer's greatest nightmare had come true, the unstoppable tide of reliability. In the end, the Sherman didn't just win through strength or firepower. It won through something far more enduring, the relentless rhythm of a machine built to last. As the months dragged on and the war began to tilt against Germany, the lessons learned from that captured Sherman began to haunt their engineers and strategists alike. Inside command bunkers and factories, discussions grew tense. Some officers demanded that Germany abandon its obsession with heavy, complicated armor. Others, loyal to Hitler's vision of superiority, refused to compromise. They believed might and prestige would win the war, not simplicity. But out in the field, soldiers knew better. Reports from the Eastern Front spoke of Panther tanks abandoned not because of enemy fire, but because they broke down on the march. Engines overheated. Transmissions failed. Tracks snapped. Crews had no spare parts, no way to fix them quickly. Meanwhile, the Allies' Shermans just kept rolling. From the deserts of North Africa to the hedgerows of France, the same green silhouettes appeared again and again, seemingly endless. Every time one was destroyed, 3 more filled its place. The psychological effect was devastating. German soldiers called them cockroaches. No matter how many they crushed, they just kept coming back. The engineers who once mocked its simplicity now realized its brilliance. They studied the captured Sherman one last time, taking notes on every detail, from the angle of its armor to the way its radio was positioned. They found that even communication inside the Sherman was better coordinated than in most German tanks. Each Sherman crew could talk, plan, and react faster. Every man inside the tank knew his role. That efficiency meant survival. By late 1944, Germany's once fearsome armored divisions were struggling to keep their machines operational. The Tiger tanks, marvels of engineering, now sat idle, waiting for parts that would never arrive. Their great advantage had become their curse. And as Allied armor advanced through France and into Germany, the truth became undeniable. The Sherman had never been designed to win by fear, it was designed to win by endurance. In one captured document from a German tank battalion, an officer wrote, "Their tanks are not extraordinary. But they never stop. They are always repaired, always moving, always attacking. We kill one, 3 return." That statement would echo through history as one of the most accurate assessments of the Allied war machine. When the war finally ended in 1945, Germany lay in ruins, its cities shattered, its machines silenced. But the Sherman, that humble workhorse, rolled through the rubble of Berlin flying the Allied flag. The very tank they once ridiculed was now the one leading the victory parade. Decades later, historians would look back and realize the true legacy of the Sherman wasn't its firepower or its armor, it was what it represented. A philosophy of practicality over perfection, reliability over brilliance, and teamwork over pride. Even after the war, the Sherman lived on. It served in Korea, in the Middle East, and in conflicts across the globe, long after the mighty Tigers and Panthers were museum relics. Its heart kept beating, its design inspiring generations of engineers. To this day you can still find them, rusting in old battlefields, displayed in towns liberated by their advance. And when you stand before one, it's easy to forget that this simple, boxy tank changed the course of history. Because behind its steel frame lies something far greater, the story of endurance, adaptation, and the power of ordinary men commanding an extraordinary machine. The Germans never built another tank like it. The Allies never needed to. Because in the end, the Sherman didn't just fight a war. It defined it. Even after the last guns of Europe went silent, the echoes of that captured Sherman tank still lingered in the minds of those who studied it. In the post-war years, many of the same German engineers, now working under new governments or even in Allied nations, reflected on what they had witnessed. They understood that the war had not been lost on the battlefield alone, but in the factories, the supply chains, and the philosophies that powered them. The Sherman, once dismissed as inferior, became a case study in wartime efficiency. American engineers dissected their own design, learning how to make it even better. The result was a new generation of tanks, the Pershing, the Patton, machines that carried forward the same simple truth. A tank's greatness lies not in its complexity, but in its ability to fight, move, and survive under any condition. But in Germany the story was different. The lessons came too late. Ruins of once proud factories lay in silence. The Tiger and Panther tanks, once symbols of technological dominance, now sat broken in muddy fields, reminders of a nation's tragic obsession with perfection. The war that was meant to be won by brilliance had been lost to persistence. And for the men who had worked on those mighty beasts, the memory of the Sherman's reliability haunted them. They remembered how it started without struggle, how its treads gripped through terrain that swallowed their own machines whole, and how its crews fought not with pride, but with unity. Years later, when Allied veterans met their former enemies, one German mechanic recalled those tests from 1943. He said quietly, "We built lions but they starved. You built oxen, and they pulled the world." That single sentence captured everything the war had revealed. The Sherman had never been beautiful. It wasn't feared for its armor, nor admired for its cannon. But it became something far more dangerous, reliable, repeatable, unstoppable. And that philosophy reshaped warfare forever. The modern military world would never again chase glory through over-engineered machines. Instead, it chased dependability, systems that could be repaired quickly, mass-produced endlessly, and operated by ordinary men under extraordinary pressure. Every tank that came after, from the Cold War to today's battlefields, carries a trace of the Sherman's legacy. Every bolt that's easy to reach. Every part that's easy to swap. Every decision made for function over form. All of it began with that simple American tank, tested, dismantled, and reluctantly respected by the very engineers who believed they were unmatched. And somewhere in a forgotten hangar, among dusty papers and faded blueprints, lies the final German report on that captured Sherman. The last line reads, "An unimpressive tank, built by an impressive people." A statement that said everything without needing to say more. Because when the war ended and the world began to rebuild, it wasn't the loudest or the strongest who shaped the new age. It was those who understood that endurance always triumphs over brilliance. And in the silence of the post-war world, as nations buried their dead and rebuilt their cities, one truth became clear. The Sherman didn't just win the war. It won the future.